Support for this podcast comes from the law firm of Davis Malm. Whether you're a developer, property owner, manager, or commercial tenant, their real estate attorneys know the lay of the land, not just the law. Learn more at davismalm.com.
WBUR Podcasts, Boston.
I'm Daryl C. Murphy, and you're listening to The Common. WBUR reporter Yasmin Amer, welcome back to The Common.
Hey, Daryl. It's good to be here.
Yeah. So, Yasmin, you've got a story for us today about modular construction for housing, which could be a tool in helping the state deal with its housing crisis.
Yeah, and I'm excited to talk about it. You know, I'm always up to talk about housing, so this is just one chapter in a long saga in Massachusetts.
Yo, housing is our jam. You know that. So I want to ask you, what drew your interest to this story?
Yeah, so as a business reporter, housing comes up a lot on my beat. It's just the common theme that ties so many things about our economy, about our state's economy. Because we're in such a dire housing shortage, Daryl, as you know, I remember this one housing advocate telling me it's like the conversation on housing has to go like this. Yes, and. Mm-hmm. And so what that means is like you just have to keep solutions going. It's not like one solution and ta-da, your housing crisis is gone. And so I was really interested in this chapter because I'm also like really curious about innovation and just doing things differently. And so this seemed like a really good way to combine like our age-old housing crisis in the state and this new innovation that's, you know, according to some at least, is very promising.
Okay, so innovation. Tell us about modular housing. What is that?
Well, the best way to explain modular housing is to tell you how it's different from traditional construction and how traditional housing is built. So imagine today, if you go on most construction sites, basically they bring all the raw materials and start building from the ground up. The difference here is modular construction is done in a factory. And so, you know, you're building most of these buildings in a factory setting rather than on site. Take a listen to Jack Franks, who's a developer in New Hampshire, and how he's building his building.
It's done off-site, comes here in modular boxes, and it's put together like Legos. So it's pretty neat how it all goes together. If you watch the process and you go from no building to a building in a matter of days, it's pretty impressive.
Okay, now I understand you actually got to see this type of construction in action.
Yeah, I was really curious to see how it all worked. I went to a construction site in Swansea, New Hampshire, where I met up with the developer, and he's also been interested as a developer. He focuses on multifamily and affordable homes. The way he explained it to me is by the time it reached his building site, 75% of the work had already been done in a factory. So I want you to imagine, Daryl, these big rectangular boxes. Each one of those is an apartment. And so like it just comes with its like walls and frames and bathroom and kitchen. And it's put on a truck. And again, like you heard him use the term Legos, it literally looks like a giant Lego, and the crane takes it up and then just stacks them on top of each other. And according to him, at least, it takes half the time.
I'm thinking about some of the furniture I see online.
It is kind of IKEA-ish. I'm not going to lie. So that's why, I mean, it's popular in Sweden. So there you go.
Right on.
So other countries have been doing this for a really long time. European countries, Japan is really good at this. Some states are starting to get pretty good at this. Pennsylvania, where you're from, and California specifically. You know, some people are starting to push for it in New England. So that's kind of the new part to it. It hasn't really taken off here yet.
You know, that makes me think about labor. How does that come into play? Because I guess you don't need as many people, or you don't need them for as long a time. How does that play a part?
I was really curious about that too. I asked him that, and he said, you know, when you consider the people working in the factory and the people working on site, it evens out. And so in most places, actually, the cost of material and labor evens out. He says where the cost savings are, is the time frame. If you put up a building in half the time, that means whatever money you borrowed, for example, to build the building, you don't have to pay interest rates for like 2 years. You could just pay it for one. And that's where the real savings is. It's like you could go from project to project faster.
And it's like, I guess you give the haters less time to stop you.
Honestly, possible. Well, they did make a point, especially companies that are building this. When you're proposing something that's going to go up in a year versus 2, that's less noise, less pollution. And so maybe less hoops to go through before you start the building.
We're going to take a quick break, but we'll be right back.
Did you kill Marlene Johnson?
I think you're one of the first people to have actually asked.
From WBUR and ZSP Media, this is Beyond All Repair, a new podcast about an unsolved murder that will leave you questioning everything.
Somebody should be in jail for murdering my sister.
A woman who's never been believed.
As long as they think I have done this, then they're not looking for who actually did this.
And that's what makes it a cold case.
No, it's a botched case.
And a search for the truth, once and for all.
Wow, it just gets more interesting.
Beyond All Repair. Listen and follow wherever you get your podcasts.
Be careful. You're digging in a place that's been very peaceful for a while.
Do it anyway. Dig.
And we're back. Yasmin, Massachusetts is in the midst of a housing crisis, like much of New England. Talk to me about how modular housing could be part of a solution to this problem.
Oh, yeah. So, this is just one part of many solutions. It's not a silver bullet, unfortunately. It's only a technical solution. And we need like policy solutions. We need just solutions on solutions, basically. I posed this question to Jack Franks, and this is what he had to say.
So Massachusetts and other communities in and around New England are facing similar problems. We're going to continue to be chasing that number of 60,000 units, and it's only going to get worse. So we've got to come up with better ways of doing business.
So that number 60,000 that he cited is New Hampshire's housing shortage. We have a much more severe housing shortage here in Massachusetts, and the Boston area specifically. We hear about it all the time. Their housing advocates say we need to build 100,000 per year, additional units per year to just come up with demand. And so basically what Jack Franks is advocating is like, not only do you need these technical solutions, you need politicians and zoning boards and residents, of course, on board.
Mm-hmm. Well, how is it being received here? And I want to ask that specifically for Boston.
Yeah.
How is that being received by developers in the Boston region?
To be honest with you, just not with much fanfare. And the reason I say that is because there's not much of it, on. When I spoke to Sarah Ann Logan, who is the vice president of design at VBC, she's in the Somerville office of the company that makes modular housing. She said she noticed that Boston developers tend to be a little more risk averse. And part of the reason is because the market share just isn't in Massachusetts. When you compare to Pennsylvania, which up to 12% of their new construction is modular, she estimates that it's maybe close to 2% here. So people understandably are not really willing to take a risk on something that is untested on their grounds.
That's very interesting to me because this is a tech hub. I don't know, for some reason, the fact that developers are not receptive to this new type of construction, that seems to have a lot of positive implications for the future, that they're risk averse to that is kind of shocking to me.
Sarah and Logan said the same thing. She said, we have all the colleges, we have all the innovations. This is not necessarily taking off. But she does think the fact that we're starting to see a lot more pronounced problems in the construction industry is probably going to push people over the edge in the coming years. Take a listen.
And I think part of that is because it is getting more expensive to build traditionally. We don't have the workforce to build traditionally anymore.
I've heard that from a lot of developers, the fact that, sometimes on work sites they're short, and that only got worse after COVID.
Well, as we're talking about modular construction and factory housing, it all sounds pretty cool. And like I said, I hear a lot of positives for the future. But what are the actual criticisms? Are there any downsides that folks should be concerned about with this type of construction?
No doubt. It sounds wonderful. It sounds like we could just have like magical factories that produce quality housing.
Yeah.
But, there are some important things to think about. I think when people think of manufactured construction, it has this connotation. People think of trailer homes. And when people think of trailer homes, they don't necessarily think of like quality made housing. They think of cheap and available housing, but they don't necessarily associate it with quality made housing. And honestly, in Massachusetts, we have had some manufactured single family homes that, didn't go so well. The quality wasn't there. Some residents complained. That was in a WCVB investigation in 2018. And a lot of families said, my roof wasn't on properly, which is just, atrocious. So some people are understandably worried about quality. When I spoke to the developer, Jack Franks, he said, honestly, the quality is as good as any traditional stick-built, ground-up, traditionally built construction. In some ways, he's arguing that it's not really about the fact that it was made in a factory. He said, it's about quality control, proper inspection. And with that, you can have just as good of housing that comes from a factory. Mm-hmm. You also have very cumbersome permitting processes that turns off a lot of developers from building in the first place. And so you have to consider all these other solutions because we can have all the factories that we need. But does that mean that buildings are actually going to go up? Not necessarily. The other thing, Daryl, is you just have to be practical about it because building one of these factories is so expensive. People who want to build factories have to take that risk. And so if you don't have enough orders to keep that factory going, it's a lot of wasted capital.
Well, with all that said, Yasmin, what does the future of factory housing, what does that look like in New England?
Well, I do think we're going to see more of these factories. I'm hearing rumors that some developers are interested in taking a look, and some people are actually interested in building a factory, either central Mass or out west. And so again, I can't guarantee that because again, they're rumors. But even if these are built in other parts of New England, think about the fact that you can get parts more easily transported from border to border in New England. You don't have to go as far. You save on transportation costs. Then it makes a lot more economic sense to make manufactured buildings in Massachusetts because then you could just import the parts from your neighbor. Mm-hmm. So even if it's happening in New Hampshire and Maine, it has significant implications for Massachusetts, potentially.
Yasmin, as always, it is a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for spending some time with us here at The Common.
It was really good to talk to you about this. Thank you, Daryl.
That's WBUR reporter Yasmin Amer. And that's our show for today. Thank you so much for listening to The Common. Does this whole modular housing thing interest you? It interests me. Let me know what you're thinking. Hit us up on Instagram at WBUR The Common or send us an email at thecommon@wbur.org. I'm Daryl C. Murphy, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.